Hi everybody, I hope you're all well. So this is my third video today. I'm going to have lots of videos where I'm just wearing the exact same thing, but I'm filming them all in one day, so there you go. And it is the next book review that you're getting, which is Life of Pi by Yann Mantel. I hope I'm pronouncing Yann's surname correct. I can't use Martel or maybe Martel. I'm not sure how his surname is pronounced. So Yann, I apologise if I'm butchering your surname. So as you know, I've been away for a few weeks with holiday, and also I was ill and everything. And in that period of time, I've gotten through two books: The Epic Essex Serpent, which I've just reviewed, and now I am looking at The Life of Pi. So I finished this morning, and I feel like, once again, just like the Essex Serpent, that this is a book that is quite possibly an acquired taste, and a taste that didn't quite work for me. So, in case you don't know what this is about, Life of Pi is about a boy called Pi Patel, who grew up in India. Whilst in India, he practices Hinduism, but he also, during his childhood, develops a fascination with Christianity and Islam as well. So he follows all of these various religions, and he learns, various things that become relevant later on in his life. And his parents own a zoo. When he's 16 years old, his parents, his brother and himself get on a Japanese cargo ship, and to sail across the world to Canada, I believe. And from what I can remember, because it's a while, because it's weird, like the India getting on a Japanese ship. I'm pretty sure it's to go to Canada. Oh no, it's not. It's to North America. That's it. Because, yeah, and later the book is Canada is involved. Sorry, I'm getting my locations muddled up. Anyway, in the course of travelling on this cargo ship, the ship sinks. And Pi finds himself alone on a lifeboat, having lost his family, with a zebra, because some of the animals obviously escaped and got into the lifeboat. So with a wounded zebra, an orangutan, a hyena, and a tiger. And the tiger is an animal which, since Pi is first introduced to him when he comes to join the family zoo, is very intrigued by. He's called Richard Parker, and I'll explain why in a minute, because that's what I'm going to do reading on, from explaining how his name came to be Richard Parker. And they are stuck on this lifeboat, and Pi has to survive 227 days alone in a lifeboat with these animals. And this tells his story. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting concept for a book. Now, I came to know about Life of Pi because of the film. In 2012, I believe, or it's either 2011 or 2012, when the film came out, I went to see it with my mum, because we both saw the trailer, we were intrigued by it, we were like, you know what, let's go see the film. So we went to see the film, and we both enjoyed it. But yeah, it was a very interesting film. I thought, oh, that's quite an interesting concept, and I knew that it'd been adapted from a book, but I just didn't pick up the book. Years and years and years later, go by and everything, I've not seen the film since, okay? So it's not like it's something that I've seen regularly and anything. I just haven't seen the film since. And one day, my sister was here visiting me, and we went into Cheltenham, and we went to a charity bookshop, and that's where I found this. Now, this is actually the America copy, because if you look on the back, it says it's $14, and it's from San Diego, California. So I was like, oh, not only have I got a secondhand copy of Life of Pi, I've got the American copy. So yeah, I quite like that. It's come from international country from where I am, this particular edition. And actually there was a plane ticket inside the stubs from a plane ticket of a guy who was flying from New York. So I gather perhaps that this particular book might have been bought in New York and it ended up in a charity bookshop in Cheltenham. So there you go. And yeah, so I it's been one of these books that I was like, I only got it for I think about £2 or something. And so yeah, it's just been sat on my bookshelf, and when I was picking for books that I wanted to read for this year as a priority, I chose Life of Pi. So just to reflect, just to say again, I had not seen the film since that, watching it in the cinema with my mum in like 2011, 2012, and it's now 2022, so a good decade. So there were a lot of things that happened in this book that I completely forgot about. Like, I completely forgot about that he had a brother. I remembered his parents, I remembered him, couldn't remember the brother, and I'm like, oh yeah, he had a brother. It was things like that. I was reading along and I was like, oh yeah, I completely forgot that even happened. So it's quite interesting going back and then trying to remember the film from such a long time ago. And I'm actually really glad that I left it that amount of time to read the book, because how sometimes you can watch a film, so like Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, that I got, hang on, because my books are still here that I just did from that video. I saw this film in Stratford upon Avon 2 weeks ago. I bought Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, no, 3 weeks ago, wasn't it? Yeah. I bought the book Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris straight away, because I was like, I want to read that book as soon as possible. So I did. But I think at the time how old was I? Like 25. So yeah, it just, I think I was at a point in my life where I was grown up but not fully grown up, if that makes sense. You know how you have certain periods of life where you just develop. You can go long periods without significant things happening to you. I think I was probably about that kind of stage, and then things happened, and you see life in different ways, especially with losing like loved ones and such. And so yeah, I don't think I was ready for Life of Pi to read it then, but I was now, because it is a very reflective thing, because this is, Pi has told his story to a journalist and author, and it is the author who's written the story, that fictional author who has written this story. So but here's the thing, in the film, you literally see him meet Pi, and they sit down at his house and are talking through the story, and they go for walks and all this kind of thing. That, doing it from that third person perspective, makes more sense to me than the book version, because in the book version, as I said, it's his words of describing the story, not Pi's words of describing the story. This is, yeah, so it kind of feels more distant in the book than the film. But back to the book. So I found this really difficult to read. Really difficult. And it's so odd. I don't know if it's just because I wasn't in the right state of mind to read this, and I just wasn't getting it. But I then went on Goodreads, and as I mentioned in a book review that I just did, if Goodreads has a score below 4, that's not a good thing. And I think this had about like a 3.5 or something, or a 3.75, something like that. It was below 4 stars. And that kind of surprised me. But at the same time, at first, when I first saw that, I was like, oh God, wow. And then when I started thinking about it and looking at the reviews that people were writing, I was like, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. and it was the difficulty of getting into the story. The way that it was written, having that extra arm's length away from Pi, telling his story specifically, that caused me to have a bit of a distance from it. But also what doesn't help is that there is a bit of jumping around, which, okay, right, I'll accept that. It's not like we're going through all of his life from when he's born all the way to this incident, and then the whole life boat journey thing and what happens to him in his life. Like, you have a chapter, you have a bit where it's the ship is sinking, and then suddenly you jump back to when he's 5 years old, you know, between chapters. It's like that kind of distortion, as it were. Yeah, but it kind of felt at times it really lagged. The amount of time that's spent talking, going over stuff that wasn't, I felt that necessary, or like there's a whole thing about how he got his name, for example, and it goes on for quite a significant amount of time saying what his birth name is, the origins of it, yada yada yada, how he shortened his name to Pi, and everything. That covers a significant amount of time for me, and I'm like, was that necessary? You could have written that in about 2 pages, but you chose to do it over like 7-8 pages or something. And you get that with other conversations that have happen, or other moments, and it's like, do I need to know every single tiny detail of how you caught a fish after multiple times that you've caught fish? The first time, totally get that, as somebody who's never had to do this before, and with his multiple religions and everything, he's a vegetarian, so he doesn't, he believes that all animals are, you know, have souls and all this lot, and the thought of killing a fish makes him cry. And so it's like, so I can understand this big significance, and the first time he does it, that we would follow that, and him breaking down crying and everything over having to do it. Totally get that. But it's like, do I have to go through that multiple times? And it felt like there were sections that just weren't needed. It just dragged and dragged. Like, how many more times do I have to, or how long do I have to read about just the waves and the motions of the boat? And it just felt too much, too long, and it got tedious, unfortunately. The actual characterization is good. The understanding of the various characters and how they see various things, like how Pi's religions and that he follows and all that lot, are good. The story concept is good, but when it came to actually writing the story, it became tedious. But I don't know if that's just me getting frustrated at something that was done deliberately, because obviously Pi is on this lifeboat with this tiger for 227 days. So days become tedious. Time doesn't pass the way that you would expect as time does when you're busy running around doing various things. You're literally stuck in a boat 24/7 for 227 days. It's so maybe that was deliberate, but I just wasn't getting. I don't know what it was. It just was really quite hard for me to get through. It was a bit of a slog, and I got through it, and at the end of it I was just a bit underwhelmed by it. And it won the Man Booker Prize, But then let's not forget, so did, books like Wolf Hall. And I picked up Wolf Hall, I'm talking years ago, after it won the prize and everything. I picked it up in a bookshop and started reading it, and I'm like, why did this win? It's so slow and dry, and nothing is really happening. And when I reflected on that this morning, Life of Pi popped into my head as having the exact same problems for me. Emphasizing again, this is for me, because just because I didn't like it, that doesn't mean that everyone is going to dislike it. There are lots of, if you go on Goodreads, lots of 5-star reviews, but there are a lot of 1, 2, 3-star reviews, which who all felt the same way as me, like it's an acquired taste kind of a book, and only if you're really in it, I think that you would really love it. And it's kind of the same with the film. Ang Lee did very well with that film, but I rewatched it last night and I'm like, why am I checking? I find it this thing that if I am checking how much time is left on the film, that's not a good thing. And I checked it 3 times in the course of rewatching it. So yeah, not that great. But anyway, I just realised I haven't done my reading that I said I would do about Richard Parker, our tiger. So I didn't want to do a reading of them in the boat because spoilers. And also I wanted to read something that is a section that I liked. So this is about Richard Parker, the tiger, and how he got his name. So Richard Parker was so named because of a clerical error. A panther was terrorizing the Khulna district of Bangladesh just outside Sundarbans. So I'm butchering these names, I'm sure, and I apologize for it. It had recently carried off a little girl. All that was found of her was a tiny hand when a hyena pattern on the palm and a few plastic bangles. She was the 7th person to be killed in 2 months by the marauder, and it was growing bolder. The previous victim was a man who had been attacked in broad daylight in the field. The beast dragged him off into the forest where it ate a good part of his head, the flesh off his right leg and all of his innards. His corpse was found hanging in the fork of a tree. The villagers kept a watch nearby at night, hoping to surprise the panther and kill it, but it never appeared. The forest department hired a professional hunter. He set up a small hidden platform in a tree near a river where 2 of the attacks had taken place. A goat was tied to a stake on the river's bank. The hunter waited several nights. He assumed the panther would be an old, wasted male with worn teeth, incapable of capturing anything more difficult than a human. But it was a sleek tiger that stepped out into the open one night, a female with a single cub. The goat bleated. Oddly, the cub, who looked to be about 3 months old, paid little attention to the goat. It raced into the water's edge where it drank eagerly. Its mother followed suit. Of hunger and thirst is the greater imperative. Only once the tiger quenched his thirst did she turn to the goat to satisfy her hunger. The hunter had 2 rifles with him, one with real bullets and one with immobilizing darts. This animal was not the man-eater, but so close to human inhabitation that she might pose a threat to the villagers, especially as she was with a cub. He picked up the gun with the darts. He fired as the tiger was about to fell the goat. The tiger reared up and snarled and raced away, but immobilizing darts don't bring on sleep gently. Like a good cup of tea, they knock out like a bottle of hard liquor straight up. A burst of activity on the animal's part makes it act all the faster. The hunter called his assistants on the radio. They found the tiger about 200 yards from the river. She was still conscious. Her back legs had given way and her balance on her front legs was woozy. When the men got close, she tried to get away but could not manage it. She turned on them, lifting a paw that was meant to kill. It only made her lose her balance. She collapsed, and the Pondicherry Zoo had 2 new tigers. The cub was found in the bush close by, meowing with fear. The hunter, whose name was Richard Parker, picked it up with his bare hands and, remembering how it had rushed to drink into water, baptized it Thirsty. But the shipping clerk at Haworth train station was evidently a man both befuddled and diligent. All the papers we received with the cub clearly stated that his name was Richard Parker and the hunter's first name was Thirsty, and that his family's name was not given. Father had a good chuckle over the mix-up, and Richard Parker's name had stuck. So that was a really, a nice little thing to say, okay, this is how we got the tiger, how he got his name Richard Parker. It's a nice little moment, a nice couple of pages in there, which is well paced and put together. But then you have all of these long lags and this drawn out writing that's just so hard to get through. It's very jarring. It's like, the sudden rush of his childhood, and then it's just this long lag, and it's a slog to get through. It really, really was. And yeah, it had its problems, and unfortunately Ang Lee's film has the exact same problems. And I think it probably was because it was being so faithful to the book. I mean, it's good that it's so faithful to the book, but at the same time, you're going to have the same issues. It's the way it is. But for example, Ang Lee does do interesting things, like the description of how Richard Parker was found. It's just literally the actor who plays Pi as an adult says it in the middle of a scene. He doesn't do that description of rearing up in the goat and all that lot. They just said literally they just found him drinking at the side of a river. That's it. So he has tidied up, various parts in the script and everything, but for the bits that they decided to stay grounded on, it's didn't it meant that they had these long lags as well in the film that just didn't work for me. Visually it's beautiful, and it was done when 3D was really coming back in, and unfortunately if you watch it now, I felt the same in the cinema because I watched it in 2D in the cinema, but if you watch it especially now on TV, it is done in full screen, but then at the moments when 3D elements come in, you then have widescreen. It just suddenly cuts to widescreen, and sometimes the widescreen is top and bottom, sometimes the widescreen is side to side. So you could have this kind of actiony sequence going on where there's lots of things, and say your full screen, your widescreen top bottom, full screen widescreen side, full screen widescreen top bottom, full screen widescreen top bottom, full screen widescreen side. It's jarring. It is utterly jarring. I totally get what he's doing, but at the same time, it's like, whoa, don't like this. It only happens a few times, but it's like, oh, that's not good. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. It is beautifully shot, beautifully put together, but overall, it's just, it's a film that, again, I'm not that bothered about watching ever again. It was all right. It was entertaining, but it didn't make me want to watch it again. And the same with this book. It was all right. That's all the good I have to say about it, really. Sorry. So those are my thoughts on Life of Pi by Yann Mantel, or Martel. I'm not sure. I'm so sorry, Yann. I'm probably mispronouncing your surname. So my usual questions. Would I read this again? No, I'm not bothered about reading Life of Pi again. I've done it. I got through it. I understand why it's so popular. I understand why the story and everything, and why it was so praised and won various prizes. Got that, but it just didn't work for me. Would I recommend this to anyone? I think I'd say give it a go. it's each to their own, you know. I'd say, you know, I wasn't that fond of it, but, you know, give it a go, see what you think. Would I read any more of Yann's writing? I think Yann has, you know, potential of producing, or has already produced, should I say, another story, another book that I would really, really enjoy. I think I'd like to read one that's structured completely differently, that doesn't have that distance from the main story, as it were. Yeah, I feel like I would give Yann's writing another go, but it would have to be something completely different, and see how I feel about that. So those are my thoughts on Life of Pi. Have you read this book? I'd love to know what you think. Leave me a comment in the comments box below. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Entirely up to you to decide. And I will be back with my next book review. I haven't started reading this one yet, so it will be in the next week or so, of Georgiana, or as very weirdly the film version of this book calls her Georgiania. I'm not saying that, it's Georgiana to me. So, Georgiana, the Duchess of Devonshire by Amanda Foreman. A book that my sister has read before and absolutely loved, and I want to give it a go. So I will back my thoughts with that as soon as I'm done. And you're going to get a couple of other videos today. Oh, yeah, at least one other. After this review, so I hope you enjoy then. But I'm going to give myself a little break because I feel like I'm going to start losing my voice, which is not good for the other videos. So I'll see you later then. Bye.